First consciousness, then service. As you know, and we just reviewed, the theme for the month of July is service. I'm going to begin with a story, a Bible story. I liked this story when I was a kid. Forgot about it for a long time, but I think it has a wonderful truth underneath the story. Story is about a woman named Martha who had a home, and the other key characters are Jesus, the master teacher, and Mary, Martha's sister. Jesus was traveling with his band of disciples, as the story goes, and stopped at Martha's house. Now, Martha was abuzz with activity, gotta get everything prepared just exactly right. But she opened her home generously to Jesus and his traveling group. But she got a little distracted by her preparations. She was busy getting ready for everything, even while the event was already happening. She was a little bit miffed, I might say. Well, maybe more than that. But she didn't like it that Mary, her sister, wasn't helping her with all of those preparations for this honored guest, because Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus, the master teacher, and listening. Simply sitting and listening. So Mary continued to do that, and Martha came to Jesus and said, "But Jesus, what about my sister? Why isn't she helping me to get ready to make all the preparations for this visit?" And I don't know if you remember the essence of the answer, but it was this: Mary has chosen the better thing. Mary has chosen what was needed. And of course, Martha was busy. Mary wasn't busy in the same way, but she found what was needed, and that was to sit at the feet of the master teacher. I like that story because it says to me, in essence, what I want to share with you today, that service is so very important, but well-considered service, really knowing what service we should offer, is of key importance. We'll talk a little bit about how to be truly helpful. Sometimes we help a lot when people don't really want our help, or when that's not really ours to do. We'll talk about service that begins on the inside and works its way outward into the world. And a little bit about exploring within, so that we can begin to discern, or as the Daily Word said, to find guidance for what it is that we are to do. But let's talk about service. And I want to talk about genuine service. There are lots of kinds of service. There's military service. Maybe you were, back in my time, you were drafted for military service. Or maybe it's service to the community. You just do that because you want to be a part of your community and you provide some sort of service to your community. Or it might even be something like serving someone that you just felt nobody else is doing it. That person is in need. Therefore, I'm going to serve that person. It's not exactly where I'm going with service today, so hang with me as I talk about service. I define service as the action of helping or doing the work for someone else's benefit, or it could even be for your own benefit. Service, the action of helping, working for someone's benefit. That's a pretty general description. But one of the things it's not is it's not relief. We have lots of relief agencies that serve people that have been subjected to a huge calamity in the world of one sort or another, man-made or otherwise. But it's not just relief. Relief is wonderful, but it's kind of on a lower level of service what I'm wanting to talk about today. So true service is that connection with the very core of our being, so that what we give is truly ours to give and is truly needed. It's not primarily a rational thing. It's not something we figure out, well, I want to be looked at well in the community, therefore here's my plan to serve. So I'm going to do this and get involved with this and support that. That's my service. But the service I'm talking about isn't primarily rational. It happens from the inside out. When I was thinking about people who exemplified this, I could think of no one more salient in terms of the example that she set than Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa was a Catholic nun in an order where she was pretty comfortable in Europe, but something inside of her just urged her, guided her, prompted her, pushed her to the kind of service that was uniquely hers. She was a unique person, and this service was uniquely hers. And so she began to serve the poor and the ill and the disadvantaged in the world, and particularly in the country of India, one of my well-loved countries. But there was so much that needed relief, but she was there for service. Founded an organization called simply Missionaries of Charity, not missionaries of the gospel, not missionaries of signing somebody else and getting somebody saved, but missionaries of charity, providing service, which was her unique calling, and others resonated with that and joined with her. And of course, it became a very large organization serving many, many people. She served from the heart and the core of her very being. It was all-consuming. This was who she was. This was her identity. This was her uniqueness. And she served in that way, knowing that this was her calling. She said this: love, which of course she focused on, in action, love in action is service. That love begins from within. It's my firm belief that love isn't something we can go out here and find and pluck and even figure out how to manufacture in our lives so that we can be a good person. But love is part of our very nature, the very nature that is both human and divine, and that love, which is the energy that comprises everything in this universe, everything that we are and everything that we relate to. This love, when put into action, equals service. It's not obligation or duty, but willingness. Not something that wins you a prize like, you got something you can put on your uniform that said, I've done so many hours of service, therefore I'm a good scout or good whatever you are. But it's the idea that serving as you are called is the prize in and of itself. It's not something that's there to make you feel good, but it's there to demonstrate the goodness of creation, the goodness of our nature, and of the goodness of all it is. My firm belief is everything works together for good. Everything is based in good. We make choices that kind of go against that, but that's the truth. And it's not something that somebody else isn't doing. So I hang out with some people that do recovery work from time to time, particularly with regard to codependence. And one of the things I get a kick about is they talk about the codependent salute. Oh my goodness, nobody else is doing it, I'll do it. That's not the kind of service that I'm talking about. The service that comes from the very heart, from the inside. And so here we get to consciousness. Consciousness is a big word. Don't get too put off on the side because of consciousness. We'll make it really simple today. Consciousness is awareness exhibited at one level or another. So consciousness can be about a lot of things. I look at it this way. Consciousness, as it is designed to be at that highest level, is something that happens within. There's a fellow named, well, I don't know that it's a fellow, but it's a figure that we hear about in the first millennium of the Christian era, called Hermes, and I'm going to have to look at this so I can pronounce it right, Trismegistus. Anybody ever heard Hermes Trismegistus? Yeah. Okay, a couple people. I hadn't heard about it before. You're ahead of me. No, I'm catching up. Hermes Trismegistus was a combination of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. I've got to get it right. Look at it. That was a merging of two religious systems. And here's what came down to us from Hermes Trismegistus. As above, at higher level, so below, the level where we're at. As within, so without. It starts within. This awakeness, this consciousness starts within if we are to seek the best and the greatest with regard to our inner life making its way into the world. But consciousness or awakeness, awaken the world, kind of starts on one level. And I like to, Betty gave me a clue to this. Consciousness can be living on autopilot or flying on autopilot. And that's what I would call default consciousness. So that living on autopilot just takes everything that has come into our life and has impacted us, puts it into a pattern, and we keep living it over and over and over again. A good example of this is anything traumatic that may have happened in your life. I'll give you an example in mine. When I was young, my mother was very demanding of me. So much that I feared her. I feared her wrath. And so I adopted, not by choice, but it was just my instinct for survival to avoid her or avoid that wrath however I could. So I would either tell her a little lie so she wouldn't vent on me, or I would just avoid her altogether so I wouldn't have any chance of being put down or risking her displeasure. That became a pattern in my life. That was a way I had of living, a consciousness, if you will, a way I had of living, of being awake that allowed me to function. But that was a very low level. So I'm suggesting that each of you may have some of those patterns, probably adopted early in life, that you just do over and over again. The subconscious mind has accepted that as the pattern for things. This is the program that we're running on, and we go ahead and do it again and again and again without thinking. We're on autopilot. But we can move up a little bit of a step in that and talk about living by working at our awareness, living at working on how we are in the world. And I call this learned consciousness, or maybe intended consciousness. So we had teachers, we had parents, and we learned so many things from them. And many of them served us well, but some of us not so well. An example in my life was, this, and you may have heard this in your youth as well. Money doesn't grow on trees. You've heard that. It was there in my household. So that was a way that worked itself into my life, that I was working, because I was taught to be frugal then, was taught to be wise in my decisions about what I purchased. I was taught not to expect too much. So that learned bit of awareness about life is a learned consciousness. And there were teachers and others throughout my life that brought that to me. But that wasn't really mine. That was something that was laid on me, and I accepted it, and I worked with it. And I worked at being aware and being really conscious, being the best person I could be. I thought sometimes, as I'm sure you have, boy, look at Tom over there. He's got it all together. Or Charlotte back there. She really has learned it. She knows it. I'm going to be a better person. I'm determined. I intend to be a better person. I don't know how that's worked out for you, but it hasn't especially worked out well for me when I looked at somebody else and said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be better than I was. I'm going to better myself. Maybe some success, but modest at best. But then we get to what I feature as being the level of consciousness I really want to work at. This is when I'm fully aware, with deep conviction about what I'm doing, what I am to do, who I am. I'm living with full conviction, full awareness. And I call that realization consciousness. Living fully awake. And that must start within. Because if I go back to these truths that I hold, that we, by our very nature, are both human and divine, that goodness is the sum of all things, that love is the energy and the glue that holds everything together, then I'll know that it doesn't come from my intention, particularly. Intention is helpful. Doesn't come from what somebody taught me. Doesn't come from just what I'm reacting to. This is not the state of awakeness, wakingness that I'm looking for. I'm looking for a fully realized me, and that begins within. That begins on the inner. It deals with my identity. It deals with my motivations. It deals with my values, because they're not something that I create outside of myself in the world. They're something that stems from within me. I think that this is the intersection between the divinity that we are and the humanity that we are. The universal and the human. The universal and the unique. It's an inside job, not an outside job. It's something that we intuitively listen for and then allow to flow through us out into the world. And this is true when we think of service. What are we hearing? What are we hearing from that sense of spirit within, and with our unique soul that's saying, this is where to serve. This is how to serve. Can we be just a little bit like Mother Teresa? I haven't had a nonstop series of experiences in my life that show this, but there have been some, and they are unique and special to me. One was, 12, 13 years ago. I didn't know why I did it, but somehow within me, something was urging me to take the course of action that I did. It started as I was driving down the street or the road leading into town, in the Georgia town of, city, I guess it is, Athens, Georgia. And I came around a bend, and there was one of those school district or school setting, I forget the words exactly that they put on the sign, but the lights flash and they tell you how fast you're supposed to go in that school zone. There you go, school zone. Well, I immediately slowed down. And by the time I got to the school area, I was doing very well at being watchful for any kids that might be in the area or any danger that might be lurking. But the policeman that sat down by the school didn't think so. That policeman thought I was going a little too fast. Now, they didn't have a radar gun so that they could clock it and demonstrate, but they said that I was going too fast. And so they estimated that I had been about 12 miles over the speed limit when I should have been whatever the speed was. That offended my sense of justice because I knew it wasn't so. And I thought, no, am I just going to pay this $80 and be done with it? But then something inside of me said, no, not because I was offended about an injustice to me, but there was something that was just urging me to go counter to what any sane person would do, just pay the fine and get on with it. So I went to court. And I said that I didn't think I was going that thing, but the word of the police officer was trusted rather than mine. And I knew that that was likely to happen. I knew it wouldn't give me a long criminal record if I bucked it. But I was led to go ahead and take the sentence of the court. And so I did. I got shackled like everybody else that was there in that courtroom that was convicted and sent off to the county jail for 10 days in the county jail. Why am I led to be doing this? I hardly knew, but I knew I should be doing it. I knew somehow that there was some place there for me to serve. Some place for me perhaps to understand better my equality with all of us, including the criminals in that jail. And so I went to serve my 10 days in jail. I got out after 5, by the way. Let me out a little early. But in that jail setting, something in me changed about how to regard all of life, all of those that I interact with, even the ones that I might otherwise look down on. Suddenly I had a new appreciation. I befriended a young man that had a horrible family history, horrible family situation. And on top of that, he was gay, and that wasn't very highly looked on in Athens, Georgia. And somehow the spiritual beingness that was with him and the spiritual beingness that was with me, that was in me, connected. And I began to know that I, in refusing to just pay my fine and go my way like any sane person would do, but to follow that push of spirit, to know that I could provide a service. Do I know where my friend of 5 days is? No. But I do know that this was an example for me of how listening from within, living from within, allows me to make a true impact in terms of service in the world. So why consciousness? Why this state of awakeness, this elevated state of awakeness in the world before we get to service? I go back to our 5 principles. We talk about that quite a bit in Unity. Just 5 principles. We don't have a big, long theology. And I see how it tracks for me when I think about service after consciousness. Consciousness first. Being aware and truly awake in the world at the highest level possible. The start of those principles is that there's a force for good. That force for good is the very nature of the universe. In Unity, we say God is all. It goes on to say that that force is within me. It's there inside me. It's built in. It's latent within me. If it's not yet expressed in me, it's there. That's what we would call I am divine. I move on to cooperating with that force within to act, to serve. That's the level where we co-create with the divine. And then, and this is a really important one for me, communing with the divine. Get inspiration from within, that intuitive sense that this is the way to go, this is the way to serve. And of course, that's done often in the silence of your soul. And finally, you get to that where you express God, or you act genuinely and with integrity. And we get to the key spiritual truth that I would put for all of what I've said today is genuine service begins within. So how do I do that? Where I usually get. You know the ways to cultivate the inner life. Prayer, meditation, reading, listening above all else. Listening to that divine within, that intuitive sense of what you and your uniqueness are called to do in order to serve. Good to do this, and Charlotte mentioned this yesterday. We had a little Saturday soul boost, and check your motivation. When you're considering about serving, what's your motivation? Are you looking to make yourself feel good, or are you looking to say, well, nobody else is doing it, I'll do it? Are you looking just to get some kind of badge of honor? Check your motivation. Cultivate the inner life. Check your motivation. And then when I like in just about every situation in my life, use the power of pause. Don't rush into that service real quickly. Pause. Reflect. Feel that wisdom from within that wants to surge through you. And you'll be there. You'll be able to genuinely serve. It may take you to new heights. But look for that fully awake state where you're absolutely convinced of what is right. Maybe a little bit of work for you to work with that to get there. But when you do, you will genuinely serve. Remember Mary and Martha? Mary chose the better thing. From the outside, that wouldn't seem to have been the better thing. She should have been helping Martha get all ready. But she chose that which the core of her being urged her to act on. And that was, in her case, simply to sit and to listen. But that served not only Jesus, the master teacher, but all of us in the example it sets for us. Back to that key spiritual truth. Genuine service begins within. And so it is.